Welcome to Oakhaven, and our silly games. Our village is named Oakhaven. It is a nice place, trees are green, houses are cozy, people are friendly. Most of the time, Oakhaven is very normal, quiet even. But one day every summer things get a little bit wild. That is the day of the Oakhaven Village Olympics. It is not like the real Olympics you see on TV. Oh no, our Olympics are much sillier, and that is why everyone loves them. We do not have boring running races, we have sheep chasing, we do not have serious throwing events, we have gourd tossing. It is the best day of the year. The Oakhaven Village Olympics are famous in our small part of the world. People come from nearby villages just to watch, or to be brave and join in. The events are designed for maximum fun, and maximum silliness. Farmer McGregor invents new events sometimes. Last year we had competitive snail racing, it took a very long time. This year the classics are back, everyone is excited, especially for the funny parts, the parts where things go a little bit wrong, or a lot wrong. That is usually when Steve is involved. Event 1. The Woolly Sheep Sprint. The first event of the day was the Woolly Sheep Sprint. The rules were simple, or they sounded simple. Each contestant had to choose a sheep from Farmer Giles's flock. Then, they had to guide their sheep down a short track, around a scarecrow, and then back to the finish line. The first one to return with their sheep wins. Sounds easy, right? Well, sheep have minds of their own, especially Farmer Giles's sheep. They are known for being rather uncooperative, and very woolly. This makes them hard to hold. Steve surveyed the sheep pen with great concentration. He had a strategy. He pointed to the biggest, fluffiest sheep. It was a sheep named Bartholomew by Farmer Giles's daughter. Steve thought a big sheep would be slow and easy to steer. That one, Steve declared. Bartholomew will lead me to victory. Farmer Giles chuckled. Good luck with that one, Steve, he said, a twinkle in his eye. Steve confidently walked over to Bartholomew. The sheep just chewed its cud. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful, perhaps. Steve was ready. He was focused. The starting whistle blew. Bark, went the dog. Baa, went the sheep. Go, went the racers. Most sheep just stood there. Some ran in circles. Steve gently tried to nudge Bartholomew forward. Bartholomew did not budge. Steve pushed a little harder. Bartholomew took one step. Then suddenly Bartholomew bolted. He ran like the wind, but not towards the scarecrow. Oh no! He ran straight towards the refreshment stand. Steve, holding on to a tuft of wool, was dragged along for the ride. His feet barely touched the ground. He yelled. Bartholomew was surprisingly fast for such a fluffy sheep. He zigged, he zagged. Steve was like a flag flapping in the wind. He shouted, "Stop, Bartholomew, stop!" But Bartholomew had smelled Mrs. Gable's famous apple pies. He was on a mission. He skidded to a halt right in front of the pie table. Steve, however, did not stop. He kept going. He flew over Bartholomew's head and landed right in the middle of the wool display. Piles and piles of soft, fluffy wool. He was completely buried. Only his shoes were sticking out. Bartholomew started munching on a fallen apple. Steve did not win. Event 2, the Great Gourd Toss. After Steve was carefully pulled out of the wool mountain, it was time for the Great Gourd Toss. This event tested strength and aim, maybe a little bit of luck too. The gourds were enormous, grown specially by Farmer McGregor. They were lumpy and bumpy and very heavy. Some were orange, some were green, some were a weird mix of both. The idea was to pick a gourd and then throw it as far as you could into a marked field. Further was better, obviously. Steve was not discouraged by the sheep sprint. "Okay, new plan," he announced to anyone listening. "Strength event, this is my chance." He marched over to the pile of gourds. He looked for the biggest one, the heaviest one. He found a truly massive green gourd. It was almost as big as a small pig. "This is the winner," he grunted, trying to lift it. It was heavier than it looked, much heavier. He wobbled a bit, but he had his gourd. He was ready, he thought. Steve took his place at the throwing line. He bent his knees, he concentrated. He had watched other villagers throw. Some threw it far, some threw it not so far. Steve had a special technique in mind. A spin. Yes, a spinning throw would give it extra power. He started to spin, slowly at first, then faster and faster. The giant gourd was very heavy. It pulled him off balance. He was like a top, spinning out of control. "Woo!" he cried. The crowd stepped back a little. He spun around 3 times, maybe 4. It was hard to tell. He was a blur of arms and legs and gourd. Then, with a mighty yell, he tried to let go. But he was so dizzy. The gourd did not fly forward into the field. Oh no, it flew backwards. It soared high into the air, over the heads of the crowd. And then, crash! It landed right in Mayor Thompson's prize-winning petunia patch. Purple and pink petals flew everywhere. The mayor's face turned a funny shade of red. Steve just stood there, swaying. He did not win the gourd toss. And he probably lost a friend in the mayor. Event 3, the Muddy Pig Wrangle. Next on the agenda was a village favorite, the Muddy Pig Wrangle. A large pen was filled with mud, thick, gooey, slippery mud, about knee-deep. Several small, quick pigs were then released into the pen. These pigs were not just muddy, oh no, they were also greased. Farmer Giles made sure they were extra slippery for the event. The goal was to catch a pig, and hold on to it for 5 whole seconds. It sounded simple, it was anything but simple. It was muddy mayhem. Steve watched the first few contestants. They slipped, they slid, they fell. They got very, very muddy. One person almost caught a pig, but it squirmed free. "Oink! I have a plan," Steve declared, wiping gourd-related dizziness from his eyes. "Speed and surprise, that's the key!" He climbed over the fence into the mud pen. The mud squelched under his boots. He picked out his target, a small pink piglet that looked slightly less greasy than the others. He crouched down, ready to pounce like a mud-loving tiger. "Here I go!" Steve shouted. He launched himself forward in a magnificent dive, or what he thought was a magnificent dive. It was more of a belly flop. Sploosh! A giant wave of mud erupted from the pen. It splashed some of the spectators. They yelped in surprise. Steve landed face first in the muck. He had completely missed the piglet. The piglet, startled, oinked loudly. Then it did something very cheeky. It ran right over Steve's back, leaving little muddy hoof prints all over his shirt. Steve tried to get up, but the mud was so slippery. His hands slid, his feet slid. He looked like he was trying to swim in the mud, but not very well. He flailed his arms. He kicked his legs. He only managed to cover himself in more mud, from head to toe. He looked like a chocolate monster, or maybe a mud monster. The crowd was howling with laughter. Even the pigs seemed to be snorting with amusement. Steve sighed a bubbly, muddy sigh. No pig, no win, just a lot of mud. Section 5, Event 4, the Chicken Coop Cha-Cha. After a quick and not very effective hosing down, Steve was ready for the next challenge. The Chicken Coop Cha-Cha. This was a newer event. It tested rhythm, grace, and the ability to not upset a flock of temperamental chickens. Each contestant had to enter a large, fenced-off area, the dance floor. Inside were about 20 chickens, pecking, clucking, doing chicken things. The goal was to perform a lively cha-cha dance for 2 minutes. The judges looked for style, enthusiasm, and how well the chickens tolerated the dancer. Steve was surprisingly optimistic. "I like chickens," he said, "and I have some good moves." He had been practicing in front of his mirror, or so he claimed. He selected a bright red bandana to wear, for extra flair. He stepped onto the dance floor. The chickens looked at him. He looked at the chickens. He picked out one particularly plump hen. "Hello there, Henrietta," he whispered. "Shall we dance?" Henrietta just clucked. Steve took that as a yes. He struck a pose. The music started. A lively cha-cha tune. Steve began his dance. He kicked his legs. He waved his arms. He shimmied. He shook. His moves were energetic. Very energetic. Perhaps a little too energetic for the chickens. Henrietta, his chosen partner, looked alarmed. Steve tried a fancy spin. A very fast spin. This was a mistake. Henrietta decided she did not like spinning. She squawked loudly, flapped her wings in panic, and then she pecked Steve right on his nose. "Ouch!" yelped Steve. He jumped back in surprise, right into a pile of chicken feed. His feet slipped on the scattered grain. He stumbled backwards, trying to regain his balance. He waved his arms wildly, looking like a confused windmill, but it was no use. He tripped over a water trough, and then over a small chicken coop. Crash! Bang! Chickens scattered in every direction, squawking, clucking, feathers flew everywhere. It was chaos. Steve ended up in a heap on the ground, covered in chicken feed and feathers. Henrietta stood on his chest, looking very proud. The judges did not give him high scores. No cha-cha trophy for Steve. Section 6, Event 5, the Leaky Bucket Relay. The afternoon sun was high. It was time for a team event. The Leaky Bucket Relay. This sounded like it might be easier for Steve. He would have teammates. The rules were straightforward. Teams of 4 had to carry water from a large barrel at one end of the field to fill up another barrel at the other end. The catch? The buckets they had to use were full of holes. Big holes, small holes, all sorts of holes. It was a race against leakage. The team with the most water in their barrel after 10 minutes won. Steve joined a team with 3 other villagers, Lily, Tom, and old Farmer Giles's grandson, young Timmy. They looked at Steve a bit nervously. They had seen his previous performances. "Don't worry," Steve said confidently. "I'm good at carrying things, and I'm fast." Lily gave him a small, hopeful smile. Tom just shrugged. Timmy was excited to be on any team. They decided Steve would run the second leg of the relay. Maybe his enthusiasm would help. Maybe. They filled their first leaky bucket. Lily ran the first leg. She was quick. She managed to save some water. Not much, but some. Then it was Steve's turn. Tom filled the leaky bucket to the brim. "Go, Steve, go!" he shouted. Steve grabbed the bucket. Water immediately started gushing out of the holes, from the bottom, from the sides, everywhere. "I'm losing water," Steve yelled. He started to run, as fast as he could. He sloshed, he splashed. More water seemed to be landing on him than staying in the bucket. The path became very wet. He was halfway down the track. He was trying so hard to run fast and to keep the bucket level, but the ground was now slippery from all the spilled water. His feet went out from under him. Whoosh! He skidded forward on his stomach. The leaky bucket flew up into the air spinning, and all the water that was left inside? It came down in a big splash, right on top of Tom, who was waiting for the next handoff. Tom was drenched from head to toe. He looked like a surprised catfish. Their team barrel remained very, very empty. Steve had struck again. Section 7, Event 6, the Hay Bale Hurdle Havoc. After the watery disaster of the leaky bucket relay, it was time for something drier. The Hay Bale Hurdle Havoc. A series of large round hay bales were set up across the field. They were not small, easy-to-jump hurdles. These were proper, farm-sized hay bales. Some were taller than Steve. The contestants had to make their way from one end of the field to the other by going over the hay bales. Not around them, over them, jumping, climbing, scrambling, any way they could manage. Fastest time wins. Steve looked at the course. The hay bales seemed to get bigger and bigger. Okay, he puffed, this requires agility. And power. He did a few practice jumps, small ones, he felt ready. He watched a few others go. Some leaped gracefully, some scrambled clumsily. One person tried to roll over a bale and got stuck halfway. Steve thought, I can definitely do better than that. He took his place at the starting line. He crouched, he focused on the first hay bale. It looked like a giant golden donut. The whistle blew. Steve sprinted towards the first hay bale. He was going to leap it, in a single bound, like a superhero. He launched himself into the air, arms outstretched, legs pumping. For a moment it looked like he might actually make it. He was flying. But then, gravity remembered Steve. He didn't quite get enough height. Instead of clearing the hay bale, he hit it. Smack! Right in the middle. But he didn't bounce off. Oh no, that would be too simple for Steve. He crashed into the hay bale with such force that he got stuck. Properly stuck. He went in up to his waist, his legs dangled uselessly on one side of the bale. His arms flailed on the other, he was completely wedged in. Like a cork in a bottle. Or a very surprised human scarecrow. A little help, he called out. His voice was muffled by the hay. Villagers rushed over. They tried to pull him, they tried to push him. It took 3 strong people to finally wiggle him free. He emerged covered in straw, and defeated, again. Section 8, Event 7, the Cow Pie Catapult Calamity. As the afternoon wore on, the events got even sillier. Next up was the much-anticipated Cow Pie Catapult Calamity. Yes, you read that correctly. Cow pies, dried ones thankfully. Farmer Giles had a special collection. The village carpenter had built a large wobbly catapult. The aim was to launch a dried cow pie and hit a series of targets set up in the field. A picture of the mayor, a very unpopular target last year. A rubber chicken. A stack of tin cans. Points were awarded for accuracy. And for style, if you could manage it with a cow pie. Steve decided he would not be the one launching the cow pies. His aim had been a bit off all day. I'll be the loader, he announced. I can pick the best aerodynamic cow pies. He carefully selected a large, flat, surprisingly symmetrical cow pie. This one's a winner, he told his catapult partner Agnes, a sturdy woman known for her strong pitching arm in the village rounders team. Agnes nodded, eyeing the catapult with suspicion. It did look a bit rickety. Steve placed the chosen cow pie onto the catapult's launching arm. Agnes grabbed the catapult's rope. She pulled back, harder and harder. The catapult creaked, it groaned. Steve stood nearby, giving encouraging thumbs up. "Ready when you are, Agnes," he shouted. Agnes gave one final mighty heave on the rope. There was a loud twang and a snap! The catapult arm swung forward with incredible speed, but something went wrong. Terribly wrong. Instead of launching the cow pie towards the targets, the arm seemed to twist. The cow pie shot straight up into the air. High above their heads. Steve and Agnes looked up, the crowd looked up. The cow pie reached its peak, hung there for a moment, and then it started to come down, directly down, right above Steve. "Oh dear," whispered Agnes. Steve didn't even have time to move. Splat! The large dried cow pie landed perfectly on top of his head. It crumbled on impact, showering him with bits of dried, well, you know. He stood there stunned. A crown of cow pie. The crowd absolutely erupted in laughter. This was peak Steve. He just sighed a dusty, crumbly sigh. Section 9. The grand finale tug-of-war with Iron Golems. Oh dear, Steve! The sun began to set on Oakhaven. It was time for the grand finale, the most epic event of all, the tug-of-war. But this was no ordinary tug-of-war. The villagers would not be pulling against each other. No, that was too easy. They would be pulling against the village's 2 ancient protectors, the Iron Golems. Rusty and clanky. They were very big, and very, very strong. They usually just stood guard by the village gate, but today they were star athletes. A giant thick rope was brought out. All the strongest villagers lined up on one side of the rope. Men, women, even some very brave teenagers. Steve, despite his day of spectacular failures, wanted to participate. He found a spot at the very end of the rope. This is it, he thought. Teamwork! We can do this! for extra grip, and because he thought it was a clever idea, he wrapped the loose end of the rope around his waist a couple of times. He tied a knot, a very secure knot. This, as it turned out, was a terrible, terrible idea, one of his worst yet. The mayor blew the whistle. "Pull!" he roared. The villagers dug their heels in. They pulled with all their might, grunting, straining, their faces red with effort. On the other side, Rusty and Clanky calmly took the strain. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, they began to pull. Their metal feet scraped on the ground. The villagers started to slide an inch, then a foot, then a yard. "Hold on!" people shouted. But the golems were just too strong. One by one, villagers started to lose their grip. Suddenly, with a collective groan, most of the villagers let go of the rope. Their hands were sore, they were being dragged too fast. But Steve, at the very back with the rope tied securely around his waist, did not let go. He couldn't let go. Before he could even shout, "Wait!" Rusty and Clanky gave one final enormous tug. Whoosh! Steve was yanked off his feet. He shot forward like a rocket, past the golems, up, up, up into the evening sky. He flew higher than the trees, higher than the church steeple. He became a tiny speck against the stars. Steve was going into orbit. The Oakhaven Olympics had its most amazing, unbelievable Steve-tastic ending ever.